Davis-Colan.
We're thrilled to have you here today. I know many of you are repeat attendees, so thanks for your loyalty and coming back, and hopefully getting some value from these. If you're new, we're looking forward to just chatting with you today and hopefully sharing some things that you could take back to build a positive culture with your remote team. We know we're all dealing with that today, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in here. So, all right, we've got a nice group here. Jason, I see you there. Kara, Brett. Some familiar faces and names for those of you who are bold enough to actually put your video on. Bob, thank you, bud. Appreciate you being here. So thanks so much, folks. Again, we're here to talk a little bit about building a positive culture with remote teams today. My name's Lee Colan. Again, Julie Davis-Colan. We're with the L Group. We've been doing this for about 21 years, but really been doing these webinars for the past 6 months or so once the pandemic hit to make sure we were just adding value with some relevant information and practical tools for some of the challenges that you're facing. Like we did one on keeping a positive mindset. We did one on resilient leadership. We did one on positive coaching, on how to ignite passionate performance with your team. So we thought this topic was particularly relevant now as we get into an era where I think we're feeling like, okay, there may not be an end to this real soon. So it's not just like this temporary thing. I need to figure out what it is I do to kind of create this culture with my team that's remote. And maybe we're at a point now where some people are leaving or we have new team members. And so we don't have that history to rely on. So we really have to kind of be very intentional as a leader to do that. So again, thanks for being here today. We're going to do a couple breakout discussions. We'd love your input. Thanks for sharing that in advance. We're going to ask you to kind of share some of the key thoughts that you heard with us in the text box a little later on, in the chat box, I'm sorry, to make sure we capture that and feed it back to you. And at the end, we will be sharing a recording like we always do, the slides that we'll be sharing, and any of the tips that we come up with. Right, Joel?
Yes.
All right, cool. Good deal. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick screen share right here and just kind of give you a few kind of contextual comments, if that's okay. So this model of leading business, healthy business growth is really something we've developed over 21 years of working with executive clients and collaborating with them. So we believe these are the kind of the 5 pieces to the puzzle to help build healthy employee and business growth. And so today we're focusing on piece number 2, you see right there on the right, around healthy cultures, and specifically this time about how to create a healthy culture with a remote team. A little bit different twist to that, as you know. But if you think about the things that you typically do with your teams, when you're in any kind of situation, you're staying attuned to them. When you have a meeting, you kind of warm things up, you size up the room, you do an icebreaker, you try to connect with them one-on-one. All those things are fundamentally the same things we need to do, but the remote aspect here creates a little bit different twist, right, Julie? Sure. So we want to talk just a little bit about that today and how you can do those. So this is our model. It again starts with creating a compelling purpose and a plan. And then from that, we build this healthy culture. From that, we make sure we engage the hearts and minds of our teams. And then we move into positive coaching. In fact, our latest book is called The Power of Positive Coaching. But how do we apply a positive coaching mindset and positive coaching habits to make sure we're getting the performance we need from our teams? And then how do we execute with excellence? So this is kind of a cycle, and you might be doing some of these great, and some of them you need to work on. But the fact is, wherever you are, we tend to try to meet our clients wherever they are and just kind of start taking them around the circle here. So just as quick that's just as quick background here. Also just wanted to share just the kind of the remote culture, the remote team culture builders. Say that 5 times real fast, guys. So these are them, quick high level overview of these: leading with compassion, embracing the power of positive, creating connections, communicating with clarity, involving to innovate, coaching for results, and very importantly, appreciating people and performance. So we're going to talk about a little bit of each of these, then we're going to pause 2 different times and do a breakout and get your input on a couple of these specific ones here. So the advantage or the payoff of creating a positive culture with a remote team is that your trust goes up, your accountability goes up. which also means people feel a greater sense of ownership, right? The productivity goes up, which also means you're getting discretionary effort from your team. They're willingly giving their time and energy to get the results you need. Your innovation goes up, and also your ability to recruit goes up, right? If you have a great culture, we know that the best companies to work for have twice as many unsolicited resumes and half of the amount of turnover, right? That's a pretty good deal. So making sure we're keeping that positive culture within our teams is really important, particularly in this environment. We don't want to be just in this survival mode. Oh, we'll just get through it. How do we use this environment and embrace it and still create kind of a great culture for our team and our organization and the great reputation and all the benefits of that still come with it. So those are just some of the advantages. So let's just do a quick poll right now, if you don't mind. I just wanted to get a sense from you guys on, I'm going to launch the poll right here on which of these remote team culture builders have you seen? Again, boy, we got to figure out a better way to say that to fumble over. Which of these remote team culture builders have you seen most effectively applied? So you can just look on your screen right now. You should see that poll popping up, and we'll just kind of wait for the results in here. We're in election season, so I feel like we're watching the polls come back in here. We'll share those with you in just a second.
I feel like it's a little horse race.
Yeah.
While we're waiting on that, I'm going to give a little background. Lee and I founded this company 21 years ago. He's an organizational psychologist. My background is in preventive medicine, psychology, and biology. So we meld those two backgrounds to bring healthy cultures, healthy employee business growth, and healthy business growth to companies. So I just want to give a little background on that as we were waiting.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll end the poll now. Thank you, Julie. And we try to bring the science of human and organizational behavior to our clients and apply those in very kind of practical, actionable ways. So here are the results, guys. Looks like we're doing the best with appreciating people and performance. That's awesome, because that's really very, very fundamental.
Yes.
And communicating with clarity. That's a great one, because a lot of people have been struggling with that now. They didn't know, gee, we don't have anything to say. Should we say anything? Or we're in this new world. I'm not sure I could commit to anything. So that's terrific if you're observing people communicating with clarity, and also leading with compassion is up there too. So terrific. Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll stop on that. And then let's just go ahead, and Julie's going to jump into each of these right now, just one at a time, and we'll kind of share this a little bit. But the first one you see here is leading with compassion. So I'll kick it off to Julie for that.
Sure. When I think about remote employees, I think about kind of a long distance relationship, and whether that person is in a house just down the street or across the world. If any of you have family or have had a loved one or a spouse or a significant other that's been long distance, you can think about the extra effort it takes to really make those connections versus just being able to be, beside one another. In fact, we did that for a couple of years.
We did. That's how we started our relationship.
It worked out after time.
Yeah.
But when you think about leading with compassion, compassion really starts with a thought and ends with action. So this think, say, do is just a little rhythm. It's an equation so that we think about, we have about 50,000 thoughts a day. And, you might encounter someone, oh, I was just thinking about you today, but maybe you didn't take action. And we certainly can't take 50,000 probably pieces of action. But as it relates to remote employees, it's really critical that we do act upon that. And the do is critical. There's a new EY study that was just published in the Harvard Business Review, and it was showing that 39% of respondents felt the greatest sense of belonging when someone checked in with them and just checked in on how they're doing personally and professionally. That's a very minimal thing. It doesn't say I'm coming with, the brigade of all these resources to save you, but it's just checking in. How are you doing? It helps people feel noticed, helps people feel important. And I guess the basic idea of the checking in is, how can I support you? And is there anything going on that, I need to know about? That can be for an employee. It can even be for your boss. It can be for a colleague. But I think we underestimate the importance of that, particularly in these times where so many people are really lonely working remote. And in fact, when you think about the brain, it really registers loneliness as a physical pain. It illuminates the same part of your brain as physical pain. And the pain is equivalent to, if you can imagine, sticking your hand in a bucket of ice water. That's what loneliness feels like to people. And that's what region of the brain lights up for that. That isn't us helping them be positive and move forward. So a simple reach out and touch, phone call, email. I'm all for old school. We'll talk about that in communication, writing a letter, go to that mailbox and get something other than things that go right into the recycle bin. All ways to just check in and let people know that they're being thought about and taking that into action. You have anything to add on that?
No, just that I have a quick question. The EY study Julie was referring to was Ernst & Young.
Sorry about that.
EY would be very happy with us because they're trying to rebrand as EY, but as what we all known for years, it's just an Ernst & Young. They did a study on that.
I should have said that too. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay. So that is the first culture builder, if we might. So I'd like to go now to our second one, if we could. And we're going to talk about embracing the power of the positive. And we're giving you kind of a cursory view of all 7 of these so we can kind of go through that. So if you would go to the next slide for me, please. Sorry, we're multitasking here. And we're talking about embracing the power of the positive. Our brains are wired to be inspired. And we could talk forever, and I would love to have this conversation about what we can do to inspire our brain. But it's novelty seeking, and we may say, how it's novelty seeking? How's that work? Because I like comfort, and I like the same thing all the time. But the brain lights up; it grows when it has novelty. So that ties into many of you from your corporate experience and from your children's learning are familiar with Carol Dweck's growth mindset. But really a growth mindset is a perspective of, I think of like Curious George, being ready to learn versus being ready to judge.
Love that little monkey, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I like him. But really that perspective of getting ready to learn, seeking to understand. And if something you don't agree with, ask yourself, that's interesting. I wonder why they think that versus they're wrong. We're in a really polarizing point in history right now. And the growth mindset is a tool to help us get out of there, looking at everything with curiosity instead of judgment. Beyond that growth mindset is a really important tool. And I think it's really important as it relates to remote teams. And that is the broaden and build mindset from Barbara Fredrickson. The idea there is a positive mindset, and this is researched, actually allows us to come up with more and more diverse quantity and quality solutions to problems. By having a positive mindset, it broadens and builds your solution. When you're working with people remotely, especially, we need more to consider. And we need to capture that innovation. We need to capture that novelty of thinking and create some synergies. And so positivity is the fertile ground that helps you do that.
And can I just add to that? So if you think about a time you're really upset or stressed out, your peripheral vision literally goes physiology will tell us it goes like this, right? So we start seeing very singular solutions instead of broadening out. And so think about the stress that people are going through now at home. Like if they're kind of stressed out, juggling with their kids, going back to school, teaching them online, keeping my job and all that, they may naturally kind of be a little more narrow like this. So as a leader, we need to be much more intentional more than ever to kind of help them step back, breathe, literally breathe, maybe have a little fun, but something light to kind of enable them to kind of relax so that their vision of their ideas and their visual vision of their eyes just kind of starts to broaden out a little bit. So I think it's even more important now than ever.
And positivity isn't just a natural thing, and it doesn't mean ignoring the negative. It has to be really intentional, and you have to work on it. In fact, the English language isn't even set up to help us with that. Let me get it right. 62% of all of the emotional words in our vocabulary in English, 62% are negative. So you think about the thoughts that you had, or the 50,000 I alluded to, the words that you say to others. You need to choose carefully, because even if I didn't exercise with you right now and I'm prompting you to be positive, we just have a much bigger selection of negative emotions to pull from. So it really requires intentional thought about, being curious and growing, seeking to do the positive, seeking to think the positive and take that into actions. And relate to that is the second point. It's about looking and identifying people's strengths. We know from bazillions of data points from Gallup that you can help someone improve their weakness, but I'm going to say don't bother. Just focus on people's strengths. The benefit to the person, the benefit to the company on really identifying and focusing on people's strengths is magnificent. It has an overwhelming effect on your business and on the individual themselves. It is much less effortful. We'll say you're in your sweet spot in that place where it's fun. You know, there are certain things you do at work, like think, wow, I get paid for that. This is fun. People working in that do better work and they feel better themselves on that case.
So I just know, I know all my HR friends out there are probably cringing, thinking, what do I do with that last page of the performance review that always says the obligatory identify 3 weaknesses and what they could do about it, right? And so we would really argue that just really focusing on the strengths is really going to leverage the resources for the organization better.
And I think the key point there is focus. There are things in everybody's job that are not your strengths. And it's not that I can just send them over to Lee, although I try to send my weaknesses over to you all the time. But I mean, we have to do things that we aren't naturally gifted at, but for the most part, for the strongest, most important parts of our jobs, we're going to focus on those strengths. When we think about coaching, that was one of the things that had the least feedback in terms of the things that people are doing best, and we'll address that separately. But a key point in that is that focusing on strengths while coaching, this is a Korn Ferry, or I'll say KF, but a Korn Ferry study shows that performance, when you focus on strengths, increases by 36%. When you focus your coaching on weaknesses, to your point, it decreases 26%.
That's a big gap.
That's a big gap. So for all of our sakes, it makes business sense and human sense to focus on the positive.
Sure.
So I'm going to add one last tip of that, since we're talking about remote employees, and there's a tool called a strength story that I would suggest think about, and we're going to talk about meetings and such in a minute, but a strength story is an individual recalling a time when they're at their very best, when they did something that was spectacular, and specifically, what were they doing? And if you have individuals share that time with one another, if I could connect their brains and show you what regions light up, it has this domino effect of positivity from the individual who's sharing it, and then it's actually mirrored, and we could go into the mirror neurons and such in your brain, but it's mirrored by team members. So allowing people to share strength stories is just a quick tip on how to enhance positivity for remote employees.
Awesome. Cool. So Julie, before we move on to the next point, Kara Hamilton had a great point earlier that said that it could be a thin line between checking in on somebody versus kind of checking up on them.
Yes.
So you bring out a good point. Let's just underscore it here. Thanks, Kara. That it has to be a genuine well-being check-in. Like, how are you really doing? Not just like, oh, got to check this off my list. Okay, check with you, check with you, check with you. Do you really care about them? That's where the real compassion comes in.
Seeing the human.
And are you willing to observe and see what's going on and have follow-up questions? Does it feel genuine? That's really critical.
Absolutely.
If it doesn't feel genuine, you're just creating cynicism amongst your team. So be really careful about that.
Excellent point of differentiation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, appreciate that, Kara.
Okay.
All right, so the third tip is?
Creating connections. And I've kind of teed this up a little bit, and Lee, I'll take the first part and you can take the second. But, you know, team rituals and celebrations are even more important when we're away from each other than they were when we're together. And some teams have been remote forever. You know, we've had dialogues with people. Their teams have been remote across the world forever. This is nothing new. This is a brand new thing. But I think we would all agree that the importance of a ritual and a celebration in particular, again, going to creating positive cultures is really critical. We have two of our grown children have been in organizations that we've had fun watching, and one had a surprise pizza party for my son for his lunch. And so all the members of the team had a team meeting, and right before that, the doorbell rang, and all across the country, people were delivered a pizza, and they had a pizza party. I mean, that cost $10 a person. Let me just tell you, we got a little snap of it. Hey, they had a pizza party for my birthday. That's rare. All sorts of things like that. So whether it's the way you check in, I talked about strength stories. Another way I like, and I've recently learned about this, it's kind of called the rose method. And so you might start, you know, some people do highs and lows at the beginning of a meeting, but the rose method, let me get this right, is, you know, something good that happened is the rose. And a challenge is the thorn, the second thing, something you're really having a challenge with. And the third is a bud, something you're really putting some effort in that you're trying to make become something great, which is a leverage point for collaboration.
Yeah.
You know, you're starting with, again, that positive and all of that. So I would just suggest, you know, you have team rituals. If you're remote now and you weren't before, look at how you can continue to embrace those and bring surprise and delight. Again, I say we're wired for inspiration. That $10 pizza at the front door that was not expected, it never tasted so good. It's like when you used to get an ice cream in school.
Yeah, right.
It's like you could go in your home freezer and get one, but that tasted delicious. That is what we're trying to create, the kind of surprise and delight, is to create those rituals that create a positive connection between someone.
Absolutely.
That's really putting it into action too. The think, say, do. We're
Sure.
celebrating together, and we literally just served up a pizza.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Julie.
Yeah.
So one other point, in a minute, we're going to have you guys break out, and we want your input on this particular point here.
Yes.
But listen, we are more connected than we've ever been. We've got amazing technology at our fingertips, but we may not be as connecting. We may not be connecting as well as we need to be, right? So we're connected, but we're not connecting. So a very simple tool that we always use with with the folks that we work with is just this CQ2, right? Ask questions, right? One of the most powerful leadership tools that is also underutilized.
Shows curiosity.
Right? Shows curiosity, shows interest, shows genuine concern. Back to Kara's point earlier, right? So ask questions, find common ground. So it might be, hey, you know what? I've got juggling my kids at home too. Or it might be, oh, my office at home looks just like yours. Or it might be something deeper than that. Like, hey, I love this too. I love this social cause. I really feel strongly about this. But ask questions to go a little deeper and find out common ground, particularly if you're working across teams. And sometimes, operations are struggling with marketing or IT and HR, or whatever it might be, and oftentimes we feel like we're at odds. It's great to just pause for a second and say, what do we have in common? We both want to achieve this. We both think that we need to deliver great service, right? So stopping when you're kind of butting heads sometimes and
Sure.
just asking questions to inquire and finding a point of common ground and building from that helps build great bridges. And then the last is to compliment. And let me underscore this, sincerely compliment someone on something they do well. Not just like, hey, cool tie today. Not who was a tie these days, right? But just anything, right? I love the way you do this. You've really been very graceful the way you've been balancing your family life and your home life. I really appreciate the way that you're always reaching out and helping our new team members come up to speed and ask questions, whatever it might be. But find something you could compliment on someone. Back to Julie's point earlier, there's a physiological response when we receive that compliment. Julie's great at this. We call her the encouragement queen. So she will walk by someone on the street and go, hey, that dress looks really nice on you. And our kids would be appalled, like, Mom, I can't believe that. She's a complete stranger. What are you doing? But the next time she say, you know what? Don't watch me next time. Watch the other person. And sure enough, when she offers that compliment, they absolutely light up. It makes their day. So finding ways to genuinely compliment someone is key. So think of that CQ2. We can get all connected with, T1 lines and all the Wi-Fi and all the Zoom calls. That's great. But the real connections happen with questions, common ground, and compliments.
Great.
So anything to add to that, Jewel?
No, just that now we're going to go into breakout groups. And the question that we would ask you to discuss is, what's the best approach you've seen or heard to create connections with the remote teams? And it's like sharing photos from the weekend or
Right.
big events, the importance of snail mail, which I love,
Yeah.
checking in, just the importance of checking in and how that makes an individual feel and others feel.
Right.
Very critical. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, keep going. I see them coming in. Please continue to take a minute and,
Thank you.
and share your ideas for creating connections in the chat box, and then we'll continue moving on from here. And the next tip is to communicate with clarity.
So in communication, I like the idea that your brain is a prediction engine, and it intends to take in information with the anticipation of therefore what. And communication gaps create an absence that allows our brain just to start filling in details. And unfortunately, although I say our brains are wired to be inspired, they're also wired with a negativity bias.
Yeah.
So gaps in communication allow these crazy 50,000 thoughts that I spoke about go negative pretty easily. And many times there isn't a need for that. We have one daughter that returned to a college campus this year I'm going to give a shout out to Wake Forest University because they did an extraordinary job of communication. Now, some people may say, did they over communicate? No.
No such
They,
thing.
you know, when they didn't know, they said, we're working on this. We'll let you know by X. They did an awesome job. And as we started the remote event, we talked a lot to a lot of companies, and they were listening, checking in, whether it was the phone calls we talked about, a lot of surveys going on, how are things going, what do you need to do your job. And the point under this one is of listening is really listening with the intent to understand. I love Stephen Covey's seek first to understand. Because if you're asking those questions like Lee alluded to, and you really don't want to listen to the answer, it doesn't matter. Everyone knows when it's not authentic. But really listening to what people are going through in and of itself, even if you can't solve it, is an absolute gift. So that being one tip, as well as the frequency. And the second really being, you know, your team or your company has a purpose. They have a reason for being. All these tasks and toils that we do each day might seem meaningless unless they're connected back to that. So you might have a unique team purpose, you might have your company purpose, but as a leader, attempting to take your communication and tie it back to this is why we are here, this is why we exist, creates that overarching meaning for those daily tasks and toils. In that, I would say, you know, try to focus on what you want people to do, not what you don't want people to do. And the reason is that our brain has a really difficult time understanding the word not. And I'll give you an example. If you've ever tried to improve your diet and say, I'm not going to eat ice cream. I'm not going to eat it no matter what, no matter what. I can guarantee you that if I talk to you, you could almost think about nothing but eating ice cream, because the not is almost disappears in your brain. So when communicating, focusing on your purpose and listening, really then responding with the affirmative, what do we want people to do? And taking out that what you don't want them to do will really help communicating with clarity.
Cool.
Do you have any more thoughts on that?
I just always think about, you know, the public school sign, the public pool sign, you know, no running, no diving, no this, no that, no fun. You know, it's like, no, 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 no. But as a kid, you see that, like, that's what you want to do. You want to run and jump and dive, right? So it's steady in the positive. No, thanks, Julie. Appreciate that. So let's move on to tip number 5, which is to involve to innovate. So listen, people support and own what they help create, right? But the key here is to involve people and really seek quantity of ideas, not quality. Don't go to like, hey, we want this great new idea to reform our business now, or a new way to go to market. You might have to come up with those, but the fact is creating a culture of innovation is more important. Lots of little singles every day, a little new idea of how to improve something, how to do this just a little bit better, how to streamline that. Little tiny things every day. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, now it's accepted. And we're cautious about focusing on quantity of ideas, not quality, because if I say, well, Julie, that was a really great idea. It just saved us $100,000. That's terrific. And I see that now when I think of my new idea, I'm thinking, well, it's a good idea, but it might barely save us $10,000. It's not so much about the savings. It's really about, am I engaging the full mind of each of my team members so they feel like they're involved in the innovation process? And true innovation, daily innovation, occurs just little tiny bits at a time. The guy that says he's working at a plant that says, hey, if we shut that door a little bit, we wouldn't lose so much air conditioning and maybe save a couple bucks. Or it's the administrative assistant that says, you know what? We're trying to cut back on expenses. Can we buy these things in a couple days instead of now because we're close to the year-end quarter, right? So just tiny little things. So really think small when it comes to innovate, but involve your team in that. Don't create this whole separate innovation department, all that. Your team can create that. So involving them, whether it's, hey, that's a great idea. What do you think about, how do you think we could do that better? What do you think we could do differently? We had one client that has a process called the dumb things we do. He would rally up his team once a year and say, okay, guys, let's get it out on the table. It's all fair game. It's a safe place. Let's talk about the dumb things that we do. And they talk about the 10 people that have to touch an employee application form, or all the other goofy things. Like, you know what, you're right. But the key is creating that safe place where innovation and new ideas are accepted and embraced, and also can be acted upon. Toyota creates about 3 million new ideas a year, and 80% of them are implemented because they're really tiny ideas. They don't have a new big program. It's like, oh, good idea, Julie, go do it, right? That's the kind of innovation and execution you want on your team. Okay.
And I was just going to say, you know, given what we've all been just going through for the last several months, it's amazing how quickly we can zag when we need to. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
innovation upon command. I mean,
That's
it
right.
wasn't when it's not a choice. You know, we've
That's right.
heard clients say we would do this in 2 years, but we made it happen in 2 weeks.
That's right.
You know, you saw that with schools, you saw that with
Right.
everything. And so, you know, we have an extra incentive now. I think we're kind of in that mode where we've been required to innovate things.
Right.
So the ground is fertile
For sure.
to
Absolutely.
continue to build upon that.
Absolutely. So involve your team to innovate. The next one is to coach for results. And so I alluded to our last book, The Positive Power Coaching, addresses a lot of this. But number one is to align on expectations. We call them the 3 W's: what, who, and when. Really simple, right? Who's going to do what by when? If we get a line on that, we find that we call it front end loading accountability, because people think about accountability on the back end, like, well, if you mess up, you get slapped, or if you get rewarded if you do it well. But accountability is really won. That game is won on the front end.
Mm-hmm.
Are we aligned on our expectations and our roles up front? So most times we get called in and people are struggling with, oh, I'm struggling with this employee, he's not performing. 80% of the time it comes back to they didn't align on expectations up front. So we think about coaching, but the game of coaching, again, is won on the front end. All right. Yeah. Second thing is to keep score and keep it visible. The fact is, we all want to win. So we know we want to be able to keep score, and that's great. And we think, oh, I don't know about that. Every job is a process. All processes can be measured. So don't measure everything, but the few key things that you need to measure for your team, and keep them visible. Even more important now than ever when everyone's remote. And it's like, well, sure. I don't know. I don't go into the break room and see how we're doing this week, right? You've got to use a virtual scoreboard. You got to talk to your people every team meeting and every one-on-one meeting. Okay, how are we doing? What's the score now? All right, what can I do and how can you coach them up to make sure they can win? Boy, I don't know about you, but I'm always going to remember my leaders that helped me win. And sure. That's your mindset when you're coaching. It's not to ding people, it's to help them to be successful. Okay.
Right.
So let's go into a breakout. Did you want to add something to that?
No.
Breakout,
I was just going to say, when we polled, this was an area that didn't get any best practices of the 7 culture builders. So it would be interesting, you know, in that you may not feel like you have a best approach you've seen, but you may have one you want to see.
Right.
So feel free to talk about that as well.
So people and performance.
And fortunately, this was the winner of the poll, the thing that you've seen done the best. And I think it ties into coaching, really, to me, which I know that was 0 and that this was the most. So that's kind of interesting. But one of the things that we heard in the breakouts was the idea of, you know, reinforcing and appreciating accomplishments toward micro goals. It's really hard, and goal setting theory shows it's much more impactful to reinforce at process points or at small micro goal points in order to succeed. You know, we are just human beings, and what gets rewarded gets done. And we are not a lot different sometimes than those little rats that were in those social psychology experiments, in that we perform more that which gets rewarded. So in thinking about that, and this isn't intended to be a manipulative thing, but we want to encourage what people are doing right. And Lee, you mentioned, even when it came to curating ideas, quantity, you know, just, we want your contribution, we want input, we want an engaged workforce, and really affirming and reinforcing that for whether it's your employees, your colleagues, your superiors, you know, the CEO of your company. Like, I appreciate this from you. I appreciate you navigating in a time that was very, you know, unruly. And I know you didn't have all the answers, but I appreciate you trying. Whatever it is, more appreciation is very important. And that can come in the form of a think, say, or do. Actually, not a think, a say or do. You know, materializing those appreciation points. With that, I'm also going to say there's one person that gets underappreciated almost all the time, and that's actually yourself. And if we think about
how— I thought you were going to say me, darn.
Okay. I appreciate you, you know that. But, you know, when we look at individuals and the discussions they have with themselves, even though it makes sense to say, I did a great job, people are harder on themselves than anybody else is. And at a time when you're remote, your conversations are often with yourself. So really reinforcing conversations with oneself and self-care is really important. I take it to an extreme, and this isn't a new thing, and my kids are like, you really share that? I say, yeah, I do. I constantly affirm myself, and I do so with something I call good job Jules. So whenever I think I do a good job, I literally go, good job, Jules. Whether I'm in the grocery or in a corporate meeting, I might do it a little smaller. I reinforce myself all the time because it's hard to get some things done, and I need to do that. And so it's become a part of my life. And it's been fun to watch some companies, and I see some departments will send me a text. Well, I just gave myself a high five. You can put your own name where I put Jules, but it's really important as a premise to even share that with people, because if we talk to ourselves, we talk to a best friend like we talk to ourselves, we probably wouldn't have any friends. Yeah. It's really important to show self-care, kind, and compassion, and appreciating people, and again, those micro goals and performance. And on the last point, I just want to talk about gratitude. You know, back in the Oprah days, Oprah had the gratitude journal and shared, you know, a lot about gratitude. There's a lot of science behind the importance of gratitude and how it elevates individuals' moods, performance, and such. And so I'm going to come toward the end with a challenge for you called a gratitude challenge. And this is science-based, so you can do it yourself, you can share it with others. But the idea is to write 3 good things that happened in a day. Most importantly, what was your role in making that good thing happen? For example, a good thing might be my son came to visit from New York. Well, what did I have to do with that? I booked the ticket. And to go through 3 things per day for just 2 weeks. Now, the benefit of this, again, in research has been shown 6 months of benefit for just 2 weeks of work. So I throw that, we'll put that in the notes as well, to express gratitude, both yourself and to others, as a way to go forward. And as we are looking at remote cultures, we know that positive remote cultures and positive cultures have a tremendous impact on everything from employees to consumers. And I loved looking, I was thinking about Trader Joe's. I love to go in Trader Joe's, and it has a positive offbeat culture. But when I was looking at some of the financial metrics, I was looking at, they have a 10-year compounded annual growth of 5.9% versus a standard competitor that might be at 0.2%.
0.2, not 2, 0.2%.
The strong culture that you can build in your team remotely, and it has to be really intentional. We've heard a little dialogue about, hey, we did a great job remotely. Now we went back to the office and it feels worse, because a culture has to be intentionally created, stoked, and preserved, or it goes away. It can go into a non-healthy mode. So it is with intentionality that you build a positive, healthy culture. So Lee, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. So thanks for that, Julie.
Yeah.
So those are our 7 tips. And we just want to share with you, if you'd like to more information, just keep on our list. We very little selling, just lots of practical tips. We try to send out a couple times a week. You can text the word leadership to 444-999. We're happy to talk with anyone about consulting, executive coaching, speaking, training, anything. But more importantly, our vested interest is that you are building a healthy employee and business growth. That's what we're all about. That's what we want to help you do. So we're in it with you, and we're for you. So thanks again for your time today, folks. God bless, and take care. We'll follow up soon. Bye-bye now.